You open a wooden door into a Nubian stone church at the hottest edge of afternoon, and the first thing you feel is relief, the kind that starts on your skin and then tells your shoulders they can finally unclench. Outside, the sand quivers in a mirage. A lizard blinks like a bored usher. The sun leans in and asks if you ordered extra crispy. Inside, ashlar sandstone holds a tempered cool, not icy, just calm, the way a friend refuses to join in gossip. You probably won't survive this heat if you stay out there long, so stepping into this nave is less a choice and more a life skill. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do here. Tell me where you're listening from and what time it is on your clock. I love imagining the map of us spreading out like shade at evening. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You pause at the threshold and let your eyes adjust. In the forecourt, you glimpsed a modest courtyard. Nothing showy, just shoulder-high walls, a bench smoothed by countless robes, and a palm shadow laid like a shawl. Wind crosses there and drifts through the open door behind you, stepping inside on tiptoe. It slows and softens as it slides along the flagstones. Wind across courtyards, wind learning its manners. The church accepts it with thick sandstone and patient mortar, a body that heats and cools like a sensible desert camel. Slow to change, steady once it does. Run your fingers along a joint. The lime leaves the faintest chalk on your skin, like flour on a baker's board. Thermal mass is the plain-spoken magic here. At night, these stones drink in comfort. By day, they let it out in a long, slow exhale. No wiring, no humming box in a corner. Just thickness, time, and the night's patient loan repaid at noon. If you've ever wished your apartment walls would do anything useful, here they do, politely, without an app, and with better battery life than your phone. A gentle historical note settles beside you. By the 6th and 7th centuries, as the Nubian kingdoms of Nobadia and Mercuria embraced Christianity, stone churches rose along the Nile at places like Faras and Old Dongola. Builders quarried local sandstone, ferried blocks at dawn when the river was kind, and set them in careful courses that still read like a craftsman's diary. It isn't a museum label stuck to the wall. It is the wall, continuing to work for you in this very moment, turning noon into something human. Take a few steps. Your sandals give a friendly crunch on the floor. The air near the flagstones feels kinder. Heat, being a bit of a diva, climbs toward the Clerestory. Up there, small slits admit light in thin, respectful ribbons. Someone long ago sized those openings just so, because sunglasses weren't a thing yet, and because glare is not a spiritual gift. The deep reveals act like eyelids, trimming harshness into glow. You grin, half at the elegance, half because some ancestor clearly anticipated your future self, squinting and said, "Let's fix that." A golden shaft lands on a pier, and in it, clay dust drifts, tiny planets tracing invisible orbits. The motes sketch the airflow, where warm air rises, where cooler air pools, how the nave quietly inhales and exhales. For a low-tech sensor, here's a quirky tidbit. Caretakers sometimes hang a feather on a thread near the arch. The faintest sway shows whether a high vent is pulling as it should. Historians still argue whether the small, now patched apertures you sometimes see high in vaults began as deliberate oculi to let heat leak at day's end, or as later repairs that accidentally improved the breeze. Lean your shoulder to the north wall. The stone answers with measured coolness, not cold, just unbothered. The pale surface gleams because of Limewash, which raises albedo so light, scatters rather than scalds. Lime sneaks into hairline cracks, too, sealing them with a mineral kiss. Its mild alkalinity discourages tiny pests from turning the plaster into a snack bar. There's a friendly rumor that the smoothest batches were fed with a splash of goat milk for a gentler sheen. Whether that's chemistry or charm, your eyes appreciate the soft glow. And yes, joke number 2, the only app that matters here is apply more Limewash. Think back to the doorway where you stepped down a handspan. Only now do you feel the wisdom of that modest drop. Lowering the floor creates a basin where cool night air lingers. When the courtyard breeze enters, it meets that heavier pool, slows, drops its dust, and becomes polite. Outside, alleys seldom run straight, a staggered face here, a screen there, because a straight shot can turn a decent breeze into a slap. Inside, the same idea becomes hospitality. Air is invited, calmed, and seated. Look toward the apse where light thins to honey. The ceiling curves in a shallow dome or a barrel vault. If structure could hum, you'd hear it distributing load through arch and pier, nudging gravity into the ground with the calm competence of aunties who know every family recipe by heart. Thick where it must be, thin where it can be, no heroics. Cooling piggybacks on that same wisdom. Fewer big spans means fewer places for hot air to sulk. More masonry means more nights stored for the day. Historians still argue whether certain east-west orientations were tuned a few degrees for climate or kept strictly for ritual geometry. But either way, the afternoon sun never barges in uninvited. From a side niche comes a soft clink. A helper sets a porous clay jar, cool to the touch, on a stand in the shade, its rim wrapped with a damp cloth. He doesn't call it evaporative cooling, but he knows the result. As water wicks through the jar and evaporates, the surface chills, and passing air borrows the cool. People sip, and the day grows kind. Hospitality is part of the thermal design here. Comfort shared becomes comfort multiplied. Joke number 3 arrives on schedule. No manuals, no firmware updates, just a jar that outperforms your desk fan on a good day. Tool marks confess intention. Exterior stones often keep a chisel-rough face that breaks sunlight into tiny shadows. Interior sills are rubbed smooth where forearms rest during long prayers. Doors are acacia, a wood that shrugs at dryness and swells just enough to stay honest in its frame. Metal fasteners are few. Peg joinery and weight do most of the work. Everything you touch says, choose once, maintain often, trust the materials. And the people who hold the place together, sweepers, singers, water carriers, masons' grandchildren who still know which wall likes shade first. Keep a quiet schedule of care so the cool remains a habit, not a miracle. You breathe in dust, linen, and a thread of morning incense, kettle steam memory curling thin and sweet. Outside, the market lane offers a slow drum cadence. Inside, stillness answers with a cooler rhythm. As the sun leans into its fiercest hour, you understand you're in a house that didn't beat the heat so much as negotiate with it. The wall promises, "I will store the night." The window replies, "I will gentle the light." The courtyard adds, "I will teach the wind to behave." And you, smiling in the shade, realize that comfort here isn't an accident. It's a conversation between stone and sky, craft and climate, patience and noon. You drift back toward the little forecourt you noticed earlier, and the moment you step under the lintel, you feel the air get ideas. It comes in from the lane as a pushy guest, hot, dusty, with too much to say, and then, inside the courtyard, it lowers its voice. Shade falls in simple rectangles. The palm leaf shadow trembles like a slow heartbeat, and wind decides to practice its manners. You watch it touch one wall, eddy toward the other, then slip past your sleeve as if checking the time on your wrist. This is the courtyard wind trick. Not a fight with the weather, just choreography. You trace the edges with your fingers, plaster cool, then warm, then cool again where shade returns. Openings are aligned like quiet invitations. A low door from the lane, a higher slit by the stair, and, across the space, another door the size of your certainty. When there's a pressure difference, slightly higher outside where sun-heated air expands, the courtyard becomes a lung. The narrow lane outside squeezes the gusts, a pocket venturi. They hurry in, meet the shaded low air pooled near the flagstones, shed their grumpiness, and split. One loop slides along the ground into the nave, the other curls upward and out through a high vent. Cross-ventilation, but with personality. If you're imagining your window AC at home watching this and whispering, "Am I redundant?" Yes, a little. Don't worry, you're still paying its rent. Here's a gentle historical truth to anchor your senses. Archaeologists working at the monastery of Ghazali in northern Sudan have documented cloistered courtyards and covered walks dating to the early medieval Nubian kingdoms, 7th, 8th centuries. Their arcades and doorways creating deliberate shade and airflow paths within a monastic complex. You picture monks and lay workers passing through, robes brushing plaster, the air they stirred joining the breeze's soft circuits. Meanwhile, smaller parish churches along the Nile Valley used humbler versions of the same logic. A walled atrium, a shaded portico, a door placed where wind would arrive pre-tamed. Nothing flashy, just repeatable wisdom set in stone. A fringe-flavored tidbit arrives like a wink from an elder. Some caretakers, you're told, hang a string of palm midribs with a tiny gourd at the end, the mule of the breeze. One mason calls it, so they can hear airflow even when dust won't show it. The faintest creak or tremble tells them when a door needs cracking another finger with. Is it rigorous science? Your inner engineer raises an eyebrow. Your inner poet nods yes. Either way, it works. Historians still argue whether such courtyard devices were inherited from domestic Nubian compounds and simply baptized into church maintenance, or whether monastic planning imported the trick and villagers copied it back home. Lean into the shade and look up. The high walls turn intense light into a cool, indirect glow, as if the courtyard is a big reflector someone angled just for you. On one wall, a projecting screen of carved wood, call it a mashrabia cousin, casts a pattern like woven river reeds. The pores of that screen invite air, sift glare, and create a small pressure drop behind them, tugging a thin ribbon of breeze from lane to court. You don't need equations tonight. You can see physics in the slow sway of a hanging lamp. When the wind is impatient, the lamp tip draws wider circles. When the air finds its loop, the circles settle into calm ovals, as predictable as your favorite lullaby. Or if you stay until twilight, and you absolutely do, you catch the night experiment that builders still love. Starlight sighting. A lay mason who reads stars steps to the threshold and lines his gaze with two opposite openings. On certain evenings, Sirius, Sothis, two older neighbors, winks just above the eastern horizon, and the breeze tends to follow the same corridor. Do the stars steer the wind? Not really, but the habit of checking alignment by a bright star turns geometry into a practice you can repeat without a compass. You smile because it's both charming and practical, like using the swell pattern under a boat to judge current without a gauge. Historians still argue whether east-facing churches in Nubia followed strict liturgical alignment or nudged a few degrees to fit topography and catch friendlier airflow. Your eyes tell you compromise is a sacred art. The social part of this trick is its own gentle ecosystem. In the morning, a sweeper's crew lead sprinkles water on the courtyard dust, just a handful along the paving seams. So the surface gives a tiny cool back in exchange for the moisture it sips. At midday, the palm weaver from the market checks the reed mats that can be hung, like temporary sails along the sunward face. When they're dampened, they provide a thin, evaporative chill while keeping glare away from readers' eyes. In the late afternoon, the sacristan, keeper of lamps, props a door a thumb's width, more or less depending on the choir's heat. Ventilation here is a shared language, not a switch. You recognize how kin rolls fold in. The child at the lamp rope, the auntie shademinder with the best sense for when light gets mean. The apprentice mason who times door angle changes by the drum cadence from the market lay. Everyone keeps the cool alive in small, nearly invisible gestures. Now walk the perimeter. You pass a recess where the wall thickens just enough to store the night's kindness. Sit there with your back to the stone, and the breeze arranges itself so your ankles, not just your face, get attention. It's the leg-level current, the one that makes crowded rooms bearable, and it's born from simple geometry. Low inlet, shaded basin of cooler air, high outlet, and no straight lines long enough for heat to build a bully's momentum. A joke sneaks in on the draft when architects talk about program. This is the real program. Program the air to take the scenic route. Markets hum beyond the wall, and you notice how the courtyard acts as a buffer. Noise arrives pressed thin, like dough rolled under a careful hand. The arcade keeps the hottest glare off the threshold, so eyes moving from street to nave don't have to squint their way through prayer. A date seller at the portico pauses to sell dates under the portico. Conversation happens in the cool strip before and after worship. In that way, the courtyard is social shade. It does climate, and it does community, and it keeps both from overcooking. Your hand finds a repaired corner, plaster newer, color just a touch brighter. Maintenance is the quiet half of miracle. Limewash reapplied each season keeps the albedo high. Hairline cracks get filled so water doesn't tuck inside and misbehave later. Small awnings of woven palm leaf get relashed after a dust storm. None of it is dramatic, but then again, your favorite lullabies aren't dramatic either. They just keep working. Dusk thickens. Someone lights a lamp in the nave, and the glow pours into the courtyard, as if it's been waiting all day for permission. In that soft shine, the airflow becomes easier to read. The flame inclines towards the high outlet. A fold of cloth lifts and settles. Your own breath slows to match the courtyard's loop. One last aside before we drift onward. Mainstream fact at bedtime level. At sites such as Faras and old Dongola, 7th, 12th century churches show evidence of porches and atria that tempered entry light and heat. Those spaces were not merely transitional, but climatic tools, scaled to stone. It's tidy, verifiable, and hiding in plain sight, like the breeze brushing your sleeve. Before you rise, you test a folk trick they've taught you. You wet the rim of a shallow bowl, set it at the shaded edge, and listen. When the airflow is right, a faint whisper rides the bowl's lip. Not a song exactly, more like the hush of a faraway river. When the whisper steadies, you know the doors are set correctly for the night. It feels a little like magic, a little like good sense. And it leaves you with the smallest smile, the kind that says, the wind has learned the path, and you, somehow, have learned it too. You ease back inside and let your eyes follow the clay dust in sunbeams, those tiny, lazy planets that make the air's secret handwriting visible. They drift, loop, and settle against the stone the way pollen finds a pond at evening. You touch the wall again, just to double-check it's still keeping its promise, and the stone answers with that same quiet cool, like a cat that has decided you are harmless and may be tolerated. The courtyard wine trick is still doing its work behind you, but here, deeper in the nave, a different partner leads. Thermal mass, the slow dancer who never steps on your toes. Here's the simple version, bedtime approved. At night, when the desert finally remembers mercy, the stone lets cool seep inward. By dawn, the wall is a battery made of earth. Through the morning, as the sun starts its stern lecture, the heat presses at the outer face, tries to hurry through, and discovers that sandstone doesn't do hurry. Energy drifts inward, grain by grain, like sand down an hourglass, steady, patient, not impressed by your calendar app. By the time the heat front reaches the inner surface, the sun is already losing interest. That timing, call it gentle lag, is the whole trick. The wall drinks night and pours it out at noon, then sips the afternoon and releases it after sunset when nobody minds. You can almost hear it. A slow in and out, like a sleeper's breath. A mainstream fact to tuck under your tongue. In churches from the 7th to the 12th centuries at places like Faras and old Dongola, archaeologists have documented thick sandstone walls laid in earthen mortar and finished with lime or gypsum plasters. Materials with enough mass to store the cool and enough kindness to reflect harsh light. You don't need to see the excavation report, you can feel it with your shoulder blade. The wall is thick enough that a master mason's mallet, if lost inside the work, would need its own pilgrimage to be rescued. That heft is your afternoon blessing. Watch the dust again. Where the beam falls, the motes slide along the wall and then slump, as if the stone itself is a slow magnet for comfort. That's conduction in slippers. Warm meets cool, exchanges a few pleasantries, and moves on at a courteous pace. Convection, up above, takes the sunnier stuff toward the Clerestory, where small vents let it elope with the sky. Radiation, the glow you feel from a hot surface, stays gentle because the inner face never gets loud. 3 different physics classmates, all behaving because the teacher, thickness, set the rules at roll call. You crouch to inspect the base course. Down where sandals crunch and sweepers pass, the stones are slightly darker, breath of the earth. A hint of ancient floodplain still living in the pores. In some parishes, you're told, the floor edge was once sprinkled with fine river sand at daybreak. Not to make a sandbox, but to read the air by noon. If the sand still felt cool under the fingers when the bell called for the midday prayer, the walls had eaten enough of the night. A quirky, fringe-flavored tidbit, yes, and charming besides. Historians still argue whether such tactile tests were genuine diagnostics or simply comforting rituals that kept people attentive to maintenance. You like the idea that it was both, a habit that also kept sweeping schedules tidy. The masons who gave you this slow miracle are not ghosts, they're a chorus in your ear. One master mason shows you how to read a block at the quarry. Wet it, watch how quickly the sheen disappears. Choose the stone whose thirst matches the wall's job. Another taps a block with a chisel and listens for a mellow ring rather than a sulky thud. The apprentice mason learns to mix mortar in ratios that look like recipes from a family kitchen. 1 basket of clean sand, a half basket of silt to make it sit. Straw pinched in like spice. Women carry water from the river in jars that kiss the shoulder with a wet moon. Boys sieve dust through woven trays under palm leaf shade. An elder lime burner and plasterer sits in lamp glow with a bowl, skimming stray pebbles from lime that has rested in a pit for weeks. You notice how climate comfort is a community craft. Nobody owns the cool any more than someone owns the moonlight. The wall has its calendar, another joke you'll forgive me for keeping. Stone doesn't do weekends. In hot months, Limewash is renewed so the albedo stays high. That's an elegant way to say the surface bounces light instead of absorbing it. In cooler months, hairline cracks are chased and sealed so night's gift won't leak out. The sacristan, keeper of lamps, knows where the inner face darkens first at sunset, if the wall is late to change tone one evening. A small repair is added to tomorrow's list. These are soft, seasonal chores, like trimming lamps wicks or oiling a door hinge. The secret is not genius, it's steady attention. You pause by a pier and press your ear where the stone meets the arch. No, you don't hear wails, but you do hear quiet, the hush of a space that isn't shimmering with heat. In some villages, an elder tradition says if you can hear the cool, the wall is in charity with the night. You smile at the poetry. Meanwhile, a clay jar sits nearby, and a beaded line of condensation freckles its neck. Evaporative cooling at human speed, another small partner to thermal mass. One works slowly all day, the other sighs a little harder whenever the air is driest. Kettle steam from the kitchen slips into the nave at noon and vanishes quickly against the stone, a passing proof that the wall's inner face remains gentle. Let's keep it friendly with your inner engineer. If you've ever used a cast iron pan, you know how long it holds heat, or refuses to heat quickly if you're impatient. The wall is that pan, but flipped for cool. It's not perfect insulation, it's a buffer. That matters, because insulation alone would lock in whatever you had last night. Mass lets you trade with the weather on a schedule that favors you. And yes, we're all thinking of that one friend who prefers to win arguments by waiting longer than anyone else. This wall is that friend, but nicer. A mainstream detail, light on the palette. Some Nubian churches show later phases where mud brick buttresses were added to stone walls, not only for structural reassurance, but likely for the extra shade they threw at sensitive hours. A buttress is essentially a shadow factory. It thickens the thermal reservoir and offers a vertical slice of afternoon protection. Historians still argue whether such additions were planned climate tweaks or answers to structural settling, with the comfort boost as a happy side effect. Either way, your forearm thanks them. You trace a faint red line on plaster, just a guideline left over from painting or repair, straight as dawn. Pigments used for murals, once they existed here, needed walls that didn't sweat at midday. That's another gift of thermal mass. Surfaces stay steady enough for art to last. When the painter work was done, someone likely burnished the plaster with a smooth stone, closing the pores a touch. The way you'd seal a secret letter with a thumbprint, In the beam of light, clay dust drifts down and refuses to stick. The wall is not begging for grime, it's content. Now, just to keep us honest, a small, friendly debate to tuck under your pillow. Historians still argue whether Nubian builders intentionally calculated time lag, picking thickness to match the local diurnal cycle, or whether they arrived there by rules of thumb born from quarry yields, span limitations, and what felt right in the hand. The archives are quiet on formulas. The walls, however, keep answering the same way every noon, which feels like a verdict written in shade. Before you move on, give the wall the most modern test you have. Your cheek, a temple of evidence? No. But when your skin says, this is nicer than the street, you're reading the conclusions in the language that started the whole tradition. You exhale, long and slow, and the dust in the beam twinkles as if agreeing. Joke number 3 for this room arrives with a wink. You have never been more grateful that rocks are stubborn. You stand, and a small boy with a broom finishes his sweep. He pauses at the spill of sun and watches the motes fall. Snow, he says, and grins. You grin back because that's exactly the mood. A winter made of clay, drifting through summer afternoon, settling on a stone that has learned how to be calm. You step away lighter, not because the day has cooled, but because the wall has agreed to carry it for you, a few hours at a time. You tip your head back and let your gaze climb until it meets the high windows, those narrow Clerestory slits that do the shyest kind of hospitality. They don't brag about the view, they edit the sky into gentle strips and ask the sun to remove its shoes. Where we taught the courtyard wind to behave, these openings teach light and heat to mind their volume. The air that's had a long afternoon rises toward them, like a tired singer seeking the balcony. The cooler, slower air you've grown to love glides along the floor to replace it. Your skin feels the trade and says thank you, the way it says thank you when someone cracks a window on a crowded bus. You move beneath one slit and watch the lamp glow below you flicker toward it. Only a degree or two, a nod that says the stack effect is awake. This is chimney logic without the costume. Warm air is buoyant, cooler air is heavier, so the room becomes a quiet elevator for heat to choose the up button. The builders didn't need a lecture, they had lamp flames as professors. Keep the flame low and the vent high, and the room will read the lesson to itself all day. You imagine this space as a calm librarian who knows where every gust is shelved and never raises her voice. The stone shoulders of the nave make all of this possible. Arches concentrate load, so the wall between them can be pierced just enough to admit light, while still acting like a mountain. Where the window embrasures thicken, you see splayed reveals, interiors flared wider than exteriors. So light spreads like honey instead of stabbing like a thrown spear. Your eyes relax. You didn't realize how tense they'd been until the glare softened. Now they slip into focus the way sandals find beaten paths. Somewhere outside, the drum cadence from the lane starts up again, 2 beats slow, 1 soft, marking time like a metronome while the air slips past your ears. A mainstream historical thread to tuck into your sleeve. In the Christian Nubian centers of Faras and old Dongola, churches built from the 7th century onward show high-level openings and clerestory lighting in various phases. And, in some cases, small vents nested high in vaults or drums. The specifics change from parish to parish, but the habit is there. Lift the light and give the heat a polite exit. Hand a mason that idea once, and it shows up for generations like a favorite proverb. Look lower and you'll see the low flames part of the duet. Lamps sit in niches where the wall protects their heat from crowding the nave's center. A simple ceramic lamp, thick-lipped and steady, sips plant oil through a linen wick and answers the day's glare with a smaller, kinder glow. The sacristan keeps flames squat, just enough to kiss the icon and leave the room's temperature out of it. Joke 1 for this section lands here. The lamp is the only influencer allowed to go low and slow, and nobody minds. Soot marks above each niche form little crescent ghosts. When the high vents pull right, those crescents stay faint, a sign that the space is exhaling well. Because these high windows work like throats, caretakers have tricks to keep them whispering. The quirky tidbit you're handed tonight is a narrow reed whistle, no bigger than your finger, kept on a string near a ladder. On windy days, a caretaker climbs and holds the whistle at each slit. The softest tone means the vent is drawing just enough. Too loud, and the opening is acting like a mouth that forgot to chew. Adjust a shutter, tilt a reed screen, dampen the courtyard mat. Small changes below alter the song above. It's folk fluid dynamics, the kind you learn by ear. Your inner engineer smiles despite itself. Light has manners because the reveals tell it to. The lime-washed embrasures bounce a gentle luminance onto painted plaster, the way water in a cistern throws ripples up onto a wall. You notice how shadows stack, a deep pocket around a niche for an icon, a mid-tone across the pier face, a bright spill on the floor in narrow bands that march as the afternoon travels. Nothing flares, nothing shouts. The nave becomes a room where time is visible but doesn't nag, like watching a kettle steam without worrying it will boil over. Joke 2 slides in with the vapor. You're basically inside a really patient thermos. The social choreography keeps pace. Early in the day, someone wipes the windowsills with a damp cloth to settle dust without clogging the pores. At midday, another person checks the angle of a simple wooden shutter, set on pegged hinges, not metal, so the sun's harsh ray never hits eye level straight on. In late afternoon, the person who minds the lamps trims wicks so flames stay modest. Less flame, less heat, less soot, better glow. The community's roles weave together. The oil keeper who tests a batch of sesame or castor by scent. The weaver who replaces a reed screen when it warps. The apprentice who memorizes which slit admits kinder light in August than in April. Nobody needs a spreadsheet. They have memory and drum cadence for clocks. When you lean against a pier, you glimpse a wooden pole with a hook near the base of a slit. It's for opening and closing a small hinged board, call it a vent flap, that changes the pressure inside the clerestory. You move it a thumb's breadth and feel an almost imaginary shift across your forearms, as if the room sighed. Low flames below steady themselves. It's the ship's sail in miniature. Trim a little here, and the whole vessel responds, even in harbor. Joke 3, on brand. Consider it HVAC by Wholly Variable Aperture Control, which sounds fancy enough to make a grant application blush. Material speaks softly but with authority. Stone stores the night. Lime scatters the noon. Wood breathes with the weather. Reed screens shift glare into lattice work. The lamp glow at your elbow paints a small halo on the wall. And where it meets the high spill from the clerestory, the two lights blend into a milk tea tone that does something kind to faces. You think of how many gatherings have happened here where comfort kept tempers gentle and attention steady. Climate control, it turns out, is also community control in the gentlest sense. The thermal mood becomes the social mood. Now the scholarly pillow to rest your head on. Historians still argue whether clerestory slits in some Nubian churches were climate choices first and liturgical choices second, or the reverse, whether they began as disciplined, symbolic lighting for altars and processions, and only later took on the duty of venting heat. The masonry evidence is mixed. Phases overlap. Roofs were raised and repaired. Every answer wears a patchwork cloak. You're content to let the debate breathe because the room already does. Another fringe-friendly whisper. Some elders speak of teaching the lamp to bow. On the hottest days, they place a lamp beneath the most reluctant slit and watch how the flame leans. If it refuses to bend, they say the vent is proud. They might dampen a mat below, open a sister door, or cool the stone sill with a cloth. When the flame finally inclines, they murmur that the vent has learned humility. It's the sweetest kind of superstition because it rewards attention and patience more than any charm. As afternoon thins, the high bands of light move across the floor with the posture of tall travelers, and the lamp glow deepens in response. You walk along the aisle where sandal crunch gives a dry, metrical beat. In a side chamber, a scribe lifts his face from a page to decide whether the glow is right for the next line. He adjusts nothing because the room has already adjusted itself. A child tries to catch a sunbeam and laughs. The beam slides past, richer, slower, trained by stone. You inhale warm dust and oil and a trace of last night's incense, and the high slits, almost invisible now, keep breathing for the whole body of the church. Warm out, cool in, kindness up, calm down. When you step back toward the forecourt, don't be surprised by the tiny chill that meets your ankles. The stack has done its day's work. The night's first notes are arriving in the bass register along the floor. Tomorrow, someone will check the lashes on the reed screens, rewash the reveals, trim the wicks again. The high windows will resume their quiet duet with low flames. And you, pleased to have learned another verse of the building's lullaby, will carry the lesson with you. Lift the light, lower the fire, and let the room keep your comfort the way good friends keep your secrets, without making a fuss. You lift your gaze from the clerestory and let it wander to the roofline where palm trunks disappear into plaster like quiet ribs, and you realize the building isn't just standing, it's breathing. Not loudly, not the dramatic gasp of a storm-bent ship, more the steady sigh of a pot whose kettle steam whispers but never boils over. The courtyard has taught the wind to behave, the walls have learned to keep time with the night, and now the roof takes its turn in the choir, holding a note you feel on your skin more than you hear with your ears. Step to the side aisle and press your palm to the soffit beneath a beam. The timber has the faint sweetness of desert wood, dome palm, maybe acacia where luck was kind. Then above it, a reed layer, then a mat of brush, then mud plaster smoothed until it looks like a sleeping dune. Layer over layer, each thin as a promise, together thick enough to matter. Air trapped within the reed and brush bundles acts as a cushion the sun can't bully. The mud skin gets warm, yes, but the heat doesn't sprint, it strolls, tires easily, stops to chat with every straw. You grin because somewhere a physics teacher is nodding. Dead air is very much alive when it's busy slowing heat. A mainstream historical truth finds its place like a beam set on fresh mortar. At monastic Ghazali and in quarters around old Dongola, excavations show spans carried by palm or acacia beams with reed or sakije bundled plant fiber mats and mud plasters forming flat or gently cambered roofs. Domes or vaults appear over sanctuaries, while side spaces kept timber and mud coverings. You picture a workshop's loom rhythm drifting in from the market, the slap-tap of a weaver's beater, because the same hands that weave mats for shade weave mats for roofs, binding climate to craft with fibers you can count. You tilt your head at the roof's edges, where a tiny overhang throws a thin ribbon of shade on the upper wall. That modest ledge is a superhero cape for plaster, keeping the fiercest afternoon rays from punching directly at the reveal. Where roof meets parapet, small scuppers, just holes dressed like dimples, let rainwater rush away before it can pretend to be a house guest. In the hottest months, caretakers smear the outer skin with a fresh wash of mud, fine as cocoa, smooth it with a gourd, then polish lightly with a flat stone so the surface doesn't drink dust. The breathability remains. The vanity is just a bonus. Joke one for this roof choir. Call it a spa day for architecture. Exfoliate, hydrate, and avoid harsh noon lighting. Lean the ladder and climb 2 careful rungs. Up here you feel the difference between sky hot and roof calm. The mud doesn't scald. It yields a little, like bread dough you're allowed to poke. A fringe-flavored tidbit bobbles into view. Some elders set a shallow dish of water on the sun-side corner at noon. The roof's tongue, they say. If by late afternoon the dish still holds a thin ripple, they consider the roof's thirst satisfied and postpone smearing more wash. If it dries too fast, they brew extra mud tea, their teasing word, and give the surface a light sip. Is that a calibrated instrument? Your inner engineer smirks. Your inner grandmother says it's good enough to keep the house nice. Drop back down and notice how the far aisle lies under a run of palm leaf shade where a narrow stoa peels off the nave. The leaves themselves are part of the cooling vocabulary. Woven fronds lashed into removable awnings that throw silky shade onto the roof skin during the meanest hour, then lift away at dusk to let the surface radiate its heat back into a patient sky. The choreography is small, seasonal, shared. Children learn to undo the lashings with a twist of the wrist, left, then right, while the auntie with the best weather sense calls the timing. Nobody needs a bell. The loom rhythm from the market and the drum cadence from the lane carry the hour into the hands. If you slip into the storeroom beneath the roof, you can put your ear to the ceiling and find the quiet proof that the layers above are working. It's not silence as absence, but silence as kindness. The way a library hum reassures you that everyone here wants the same thing. Low flames haven't woken a sweat in this chamber. Even the jars stacked like sleeping seals along the wall hold their cool. One jar, porous and slightly weeping, lends the room a shy lick of evaporative chill. The roof above it absorbs vapor, wicks it outward, and releases it to the dry air, which carries away a little heat each time it drinks. Joke 2 floats in with the damp. If you've ever wished your ceiling would do more, this one is multitasking better than your inbox filters. Materials are manners, and the roof is an etiquette teacher. Palm trunks are straight talkers, light, strong enough in short spans, unbothered by dry jokes. The reed layer is the diplomat, placing small pockets of stillness between hot and cool. The mud plaster is the poet, exhaling moisture when the afternoon is sharp, and swallowing it again when night calms the tongue. Together they behave like lungs, a slow breath whose rhythm you join without noticing. Occasionally, when a dust storm argues, a thin crust fractures, a caretaker climbs up at dawn, mists the area, pats it smooth, hums a tune, No drama. Repairs here are closer to grooming than surgery. You pause where a small opening, no bigger than a palm, pierces the parapet. It isn't for a view, it's for a voice, the roof letting the underside space exhale. Historians still argue whether some churches deliberately used a double skin idea, a thin, ventilated gap between two layers of covering, to hush the heat faster at night, or whether what we read as gaps are only the archaeology of repairs and seasons stacked one on another. The roof itself doesn't care about the argument. It cares about being able to finish a long day without tossing and turning. A caretaker hands you a reed. He runs its tip along the outer skin with the practiced motion of someone icing a cake. Where the reed snags, the mud is too dry. Where it glides, the balance is right. That's the third tidy trick you collect tonight. Another you notice by accident. A ring of tiny ostrich eggshell beads strung above the parapet on a cord. When they tap softly against the stucco, the breeze is fresh and kind. When they fall still in punishing heat, somebody goes to check that the reed mats are angled correctly. It's wind chime as thermostat, a charm that filters information without scolding. Joke 3, whispered in the beads. Who needs notifications when you have a necklace that tells you the weather? The social weave is as crucial as the reed weave. Roof days call for mixed crews, women with the palms and mats, men with the heavier jars and beams, apprentices chasing cracks with wetted hands, elders telling stories of the year the plaster learned humility after an early rain. The market keeps the materials moving. Bundles of reed arrive to the loom rhythm, straw by the basket, oil by the skin. Payment is part coin, part barter, part reputation, because a cool roof is its own advertisement. When midday worship ends, people lean in the palm leaf shade and remark on the roof's temper. Compliments go to the crew like water goes to a thirsty plant. A mainstream note to tuck gently under your tongue. In phases across the 10th to 12th centuries at Old Dongola, churches show roof alterations, raised wall heads, repair plasters, the introduction of brick vaulting in select spaces, testifying to seasons of maintenance and adaptation rather than a single, fixed solution. In a climate that changes by the hour, finished isn't a word you trust. Ready for tomorrow is closer to the truth. As afternoon leans toward amber, you watch the light on the exterior mud skin change tone from bright straw to honey to tea. That cooling color shift is the building's sunset yoga. The heat it gathered now goes back to the sky in long, calm wavelengths. The parapet's shadow climbs a little higher, and a sparrow writes a crooked note on the air. Down in the nave, lamp glow waits its turn. Up here, you stand very still and realize how restful it is to be under a roof that prefers secrets to speeches. One last scholarly pillow before we roll into evening. Historians still argue whether roof parapets sometimes held shallow trays for temporary wetting, an intentional evaporative cap on the hottest days, or whether the stains we read that way belong to later domestic reuse. The documents blink like tired eyes. The plaster offers ambiguous hints. You accept that the debate itself is part of the roof's breath, questions out, answers in, repeated as needed. You run a fingertip through a tiny crack, then wipe a smudge of mud on your sleeve and step back under the palm leaf shade. The room below greets you with its small ankle-cool current. The walls keep their slow promise. The high slits, modest as always, sip warm air and return it to the sky. Above, the roof continues its unhurried conversation with the weather, and for once you don't need to fix anything or name everything. You only need to breathe with it, matching your tempo to the loom rhythm, still tapping from the market. Steady, steady, good. Now the day's sharp edges soften, and the building seems to lengthen its own breath to match yours. The courtyard's wind becomes a murmur, then a hush. The palm awnings loosen, their lashings quiet as sleep. On the flagstones, a last seam of light thins into thread and vanishes. The roof surrenders the warmth it held without complaint, and the walls, patient all afternoon, exhale a cool that feels like water cupped in the hands. Somewhere a jar settles. The ripple inside grows still. In the nave, lamp glow folds into the grain of the stone until the room is more dusk than light. Outside, stars blur at the edges as if you are already looking at them through a friendly dream. Breathe in, slow and kind. Breathe out, longer than before. The night has the watch now, and everything you learned about wind and shade and time keeps working while you rest. The church is quiet, and so are you, safe and sleepy beneath its gentle roof.